I don't typically start episodes this way. Actually, this is a first. In this episode, it goes there. I've vacillated countless times in writing this episode, and even more so in hitting the upload button. And while my purpose of Calm It Down podcast is to encourage and enlighten and even embolden you in a positive, almost lighthearted way, this episode goes a bit deeper than the others typically do. Today's subject has been on my heart for some time, which tells me, if I may, a number of you are probably meant to hear this. While it does have a happy, encouraging ending and a purpose, for some, it may not be the right time to hear it. This episode may activate some upsetting memories, and I want to be sensitive to that. If this is the case, perhaps sharing this episode with your counselor or professional therapist first, and then open this conversation under their guidance. I highly recommend. Today's episode is about scars. Those memories or relationships or difficult seasons that have left a mark either physically or emotionally. I care about you. And while my heart behind this podcast is to hold your hand through life's seasons, I also know that some of you may still be in a season of healing. And that's to be celebrated. That's incredible. Healing is such a beautiful process. So please, if this is the case, I'm proud of you. I love you. I care for you. And perhaps maybe revisiting this episode at a later time, maybe even with a friend, so you both can discuss it afterwards. There's no rush, as this episode will live for all eternity in the vast ether world existence of podcasts. I guess as long as you have internet. So I just wanted to mention that up front because you're really important to me. Okay, now on with the calm. I have a scar on my stomach, just below my right abs. I've had it for years, since 2008, actually. Sometimes I don't even notice it, and sometimes I can't help but see it, particularly if I'm shirtless, like at the beach or something. I've come to love the scar, to be honest, though. And it's taken me a while to get to that point, swimming through a number of emotional oceans, but yesterday I stepped out of the shower and it caught my eye, and I smiled. Odd, I know. In 2005, I started experiencing these symptoms of this pesky IBD called ulcerative colitis. It would come and go, some days good, some days not so good. Over the span of 3 years, the not so good days became the everyday. I had lost a tremendous amount of weight in just a month and a half. I was no longer able to work and was practically bedridden. And this was right at the time I was about to record my very first solo piano album. The day before the recording, I was literally on the floor in a fetal position, wondering if my wife and I could make the 3.5-hour drive from Brooklyn to Vermont. Arriving there, I recorded the album in a day and a half. In between each take of the songs, I would lay on the floor under the piano to great view, while my wife and the producer would listen back to the takes. Recording that album, called Set on a Hill, it was a grueling process, but it was also a healing one. Each stroke of the key was an emotional reprieve of what I had been going through for a number of years. It was an escape. It was, in a roundabout way, my way out. I felt safe in these songs, which is why, without question, in my opinion, why so many have reached out to share their stories of how this album has been an emotional embrace in their own lives. Those songs were because of my experience and what I was literally going through. Those stories that I heard from others, They're heartbreaking and yet heartwarming all at once. Some would say, you're holding my hand through the most difficult time in life. And others would say something like, I'm going through a terrible divorce, and I lay on the floor listening to this album again and again as it brings me such comfort. The more people reached out, the less I remember how difficult the album was to make. The day after recording, I checked into the Presbyterian Hospital in the Upper East Side and didn't leave its doors for 3 weeks. It was the first of 3 surgeries spanning a course of 3 years. Those days are behind me, long behind me, but the lessons and all that I learned about life, its ups and downs in the process, the lessons, they're still with me and always will be. My scar has a story. Not one of like, oh, look what I went through, poor me, but a story how I made it through to the other side. And what I found on the other side, when I was finally there, was actually a friend in tears, feeling completely alone as he had just been diagnosed with a disease he had never heard of, and one that I was rather familiar with, ulcerative colitis. You wouldn't understand, he said. Oh, but I do. Oh, I do, I told him. Let's walk through this journey together. And it wasn't just him. Over the years, I've shared my experience with many people going through ulcerative colitis, either in person or by phone, getting random phone calls saying, hey, I've got a friend going through this. Can I give him your number? And I've talked to complete strangers about, well, everything. Scars. Scars are hard. Be it physical or emotional, visible or hidden, scars are hard. But here's what I want you to hear. No matter what they look like, or even where they are, scars always have a story to tell. Your scar is your story. I'm Chad Lawson, and let's calm it down in 3, 2, 1. For some of us, scars can be a reminder of something that we went through that we would much rather forget. Perhaps an abusive relationship, a regret, or an emotional struggle. Or maybe you've experienced abuse or trauma in your life, or battled a serious illness. This scar may be a source of shame. We may feel like we need to hide it, and like it's an embarrassing secret, or maybe we feel like we're not good enough or strong enough to share it. I want you to listen closely. It's not true. It's not. I want you to know something. You're strong. No matter what our scars represent, they are a part of who we are. You are unique. You are special because of them. And they are a reminder that you're capable of overcoming anything. You are strong. Whatever you went through, whatever happened to you, the demons you defeated, the obstacles you hurdled, the doors you closed and locked and threw away the key to, whatever those things were, what if those scars are now your stripes? I'm going to say that again because it's a lot to process. What if your scars are now your stripes? A show of strength of what you have gone through, that you did it. Did you ask for that scar? No, not at all. And I'm sorry that you went through what you did. But what if, hear me out, what if that season of self-doubt, of depression, that debilitating illness, that abusive relationship, or even wanting to end it all, whatever left its mark, what if it was so that you can be the help to someone else that isn't strong enough on their own? You are strong. You made it. You did it. You made it through. And you have the stripes to show it. But what about those who can't leave that relationship? What about those who can't get out of bed because of anxiety? What about those who have no hope from sunup to sundown? You've been there. You've walked in their shoes. You know and can probably even anticipate their next struggles. Your story is their struggle. Did you hear that? Your story is their struggle. Let your scar be their salvation. What you've been through, you've made it. And now you have the power, the ability to pick those people up that aren't strong enough, that are struggling, that don't even know where to look. Call your friend who you know is being abused and say, I'm coming to pick you up. Lay on the bed, binge watching a show with your friend who just needs someone next to them, that just wants someone there. Volunteer at the shelter for abused women or children. Even if it's helping in the kitchen or answering the phone, you've been there. Sign up to be a big brother. Your story is their struggle. And no one knows their struggle better than you. Whatever it was, what you've gone through is nothing shy of devastating. And no one can take that away from you. You did it. But imagine the lives that you could change by sowing what you've been through into the life of someone that doesn't even know where to begin. Scars, as I said in the beginning, are hard. They can be a reminder of a time when we were vulnerable, or they can be a sign of our strength. Either way, they're a part of our history. And while we may not always like them, they remind us. They remind you. You are a survivor. You've overcome adversity and came out on the other side stronger for it. So the next time you look at your scars, I want you to remember how far you've come and how strong you really are. For more episodes, concert dates, or to send me some delicious chocolate chip cookies, visit calmitdownpodcast.com. This podcast was written and produced by yours truly, Chad Lawson, composer, pianist, and nationally recognized sweet tooth. Now, before we part ways, I want to remind you that the views, expressions, and techniques in this episode are of my personal opinion and not intended to serve as a substitute for medical advice or diagnoses rendered to you by your individual doctor or other healthcare provider. Please seek the advice of a licensed physician or therapist for any medical or emotional concerns. I'm not a licensed therapist or physician, but I am an empath by nature, and I hope this and future podcast episodes can aid your emotional needs. To find a list of licensed professionals in your area, visit calmitdownpodcast.com. And if you enjoy this podcast, and want to support the time, the person involved, and content you hear each week, please consider pitching in $2 or $3 a month. Your contribution will help keep this podcast ad-free. Visit calmitdownpodcast.com, look for the white coffee cup with the heart in the center, or scan the QR code at the bottom of the page. Again, calmitdownpodcast.com. Remember, be kind to your mind. And join me next week as we calm it down.